There is no death, only a change of worlds. That's an old Native American quote that my grandmother taught me back when I was a child. I don't remember who said it, but that's what got me interested in ghosts, spirits, and things of that sort. My grandmother, on my mother's side, is a very spiritual woman, always holding seances, talking with spirits, burning candles, and things like that. I learnt most of what I know about the spirit world from her. She just turned 92 this year, and has more energy than most 20-year-olds I know. That scares me sometimes. Hi, my name is Lily Sweetwater, and yes, I am Native American, half Cherokee on my father's side. My father, Dewey, meaning David in English, is 100% full-blooded Native American. My mother, Shannon, meaning Shannon in English, is 100% full-blooded African American. That's a family joke. It's okay if you don't get it. I also have a brother, Somas, meaning Thomas in English. He's a few years older than me. 6 years to be exact. He chose to stay and live on the reservation along with my parents, about an hour away from where I live now. He's a deputy on the reservation's police force. They have a saying, what happens on the res, stays on the res, and they mean it. The laws are different there. Now, for those of you that don't know what a reservation is a piece of land managed by a federally recognized Native American tribe, such as Cherokee, Cheyenne, Nanticoke, etc., rather than being managed by the state for which it's located in. There are around 326 reservations in the United States, give or take, mostly located in the western parts of the country. The reservation I am from is a Cherokee reservation. Anyway, back to the story. When I turned 18, I'm 32 now, I decided that I want to see what life was like off the reservation. So I went to my parents and asked their permission to leave the reservation and live on my own. They agreed under one condition, that I didn't leave the state. That seemed kind of odd, but it's a fairly big state, so okay. I agreed to the condition. I'd been saving my tips and wages working as a waitress at the Red Horse Bar. That's a bar on the reservation. I know many of you are probably thinking, since I was only 18, there was no way I could work at a bar. But since it was on a reservation and not governed by the state, the drinking age was 16, which allowed me to work there. Anyway, I had a pretty good amount saved up. So I packed up what little belongings I had and moved out. I had to quit my job since I was moving off of the reservation, therefore I could not work there anymore. Reservation law says, if you don't live there, you can't work there. Anyway, my brother gave me a ride. We drove for a while, till I saw a sign that said room for rent. He stopped, and I got out and spoke to the homeowner. I rented a small basement apartment from a nice lady named Candy, and I've lived there ever since. You remember Candy, right? She has a very friendly and very big dog named Buster, but that's a different story. Candy and I get along great. When I first moved in, she knew I was looking for a job and offered me a cashier position at the grocery store that she worked at. Well, when it opened back up, that is. Some place called Barnaby's. A very old store, as she put it. Apparently, they had a sewer pipe break a while ago and the whole place had to be gutted, but that's a different story. Anyway, I gladly accepted the job. She said they just had it about half finished, and that it should be open in about a month or so. She also said that I would have to meet the owner, Pat, as he likes to meet all of his new hires personally. She called Pat and set up a meeting for the next day at 1 PM. That meeting would change my life, and Barnaby's forever. Anyway, the next day came, I got up, showered and got dressed in a nice pair of jeans and a blouse, ready for my meeting with Pat. Candy was sitting at a computer, wearing a pair of leggings with smiley faces on them and a white t-shirt that said Operation Insomnia on it. I asked her what it meant, and she spent the next 20 minutes explaining to me that Operation Insomnia is a YouTube narration channel, where the guy reads all kind of creepy and crazy stories. What's YouTube? I thought. I gotta give props to OP, she said. I just got it in the mail the other day. Ain't it cool? Yeah, I said. She let me listen to a couple of stories before we left. Anyway, we hopped in a van, as I didn't have a car yet, and we made our way to the store. I asked Candy if we could stop at the coffee shop across the street from the store for some coffee. Real coffee, not that mocha, choca frappa, kappa crap, actual brewed coffee. I told her that I'd buy, and she agreed. Candy got an energy drink, and I got an extra large black coffee. You see, growing up on the reservation, we couldn't really afford such luxuries as cream and sugar, so I learnt to drink coffee black. Anyway, the cashier really creeped me out. She had these really weird-looking green eyes, but that's a different story. We got our drinks, and got the heck out of there. We arrived at the store shortly after. Now, Candy was not kidding when she said that Barnaby's is a very old store. It's a decent size, all brick building. There's no big glass picture window in front of the store, like the big name stores have. There are what looks like 2 house windows on either side of a wooden door, painted white with the paint peeling off. There are no other windows in the whole place. However, there is a rather large room off to the back of the store with its own entrance door. You can tell that it's an add-on, as it has aluminium sidings rather than being brick. We walked inside. The air was thick and heavy. I could tell something was going on there. An older gentleman walked up to Candy and gave her a hug. They talked for a few minutes about how everything was going with the store. I overheard him say that one of their regular customers, a man named Donovan Mitchell, but that's a different story. Apparently, he works for the governor of the state and convinced him to declare Barnaby's a historical landmark because of all its history. Therefore, it could never be torn down. Barnaby's will live forever, I heard him say. He also said that the state pitched in the rest of the money that it would take to complete the renovations. A loud bang was then heard throughout the store. Candy, the man, and everyone else turned to look in the direction of the sound. "Not again," I heard him whisper to himself. Suddenly, one of the guys up on the scaffolding, doing drywall, yelled out, "It's okay, everyone. I just dropped my drill. Nothing to worry about." Everyone sighed in relief. I just stood there confused. Candy then introduced me to the man. "Lily, this is Pat. Pat, Lily." He extended his hand as a greeting. I extended mine to meet his. As my hand touched his, I suddenly became very lightheaded and dizzy. I started to hear various war cries of Native Americans preparing for battle, all at the same time. It was like they were trying to tell me something. I quickly pulled my hand back and covered my ears to drown out the noise, dropping my coffee in the process. Speaking of coffee, I'm going to make some right now. Hold on a sec. Okay, coffee's going. Let's get back to the story. I began to shake and thrust my head all around, my long hair hitting Pat and Candy directly in the face. I began screaming like a lunatic as I ran out of the store. Once outside, the voices stopped. I just put my hands down to my side, turned, and gave a "what the frick?" stare at the building. Both Candy and Pat came running to my side, asking if I was okay. Shaken and a little distraught, I asked Pat if anything weird had ever happened here, and if he knew anything about this land. He laughed "you're not gonna believe it" laugh. He then invited Candy and I to have a seat on his bus, so we could talk. That was the craziest looking thing I had ever seen in my life. But again, that's a different story. Candy and I sat on the futon, while Pat stood in the doorway. He proceeded to tell me about every single thing that had happened here, as much as he could remember, that is. The chicken fryer incident, the body parts in the trash, that freak storm, the black shadows, something to do with a Pepsi truck, and many other things. He also said that he had a ghost hunting team investigate the store about 6 months ago. He's still waiting to find out what happened. And then, to top it all off, he told me that this place is built on an Indian burial ground. I was in shock. Horrified. Indian burial grounds? I thought to myself. Do you know how disrespectful that is? I was furious. I contemplated walking out right then and there, but a job is a job, and I really needed one. I thought of my grandmother, and that quote that she taught me many years ago. I decided that I may be able to help. I told Pat I wasn't too happy about the store being built on an Indian burial ground, given the fact I'm Native American. He apologized, saying that he didn't know. I accepted his apology, and asked if it would be alright to contact my grandmother and ask her to come to the property and perform a seance to hopefully figure out why the spirits are so restless. Besides the obvious, of course. He smiled and graciously said yes. I contacted my grandmother and told her what was happening. She agreed to hold the seance the next Friday. Friday the 13th. I love those movies. I have all 107 of them. I'm exaggerating, of course, but there is so many of them. Anyway, Friday came, and Candy and I drove to pick up my grandmother. My grandmother explained, as I loaded her equipment into the van, that she didn't know if the seance would work, given the language barrier, but she was willing to give it a try. This should be interesting, I thought. We arrived back at the store about 11 p.m. Pat was already there. My brother showed up, unannounced, and offered to join us as a translator, as he is fluent in English and Cherokee. My father taught him when he was younger. How he knew about what we were doing, I don't know, but he did. Maybe the spirits told him. Nope, the coffee's just beeped. I'll be back in a sec. There's nothing like a fresh, hot cup of coffee on a cold winter's morning. Candy's got me hooked on pumpkin spice. It's amazing. She bought a ton of it last October. Anyway, where did I leave off? Oh, yeah. So, we unloaded the van and we set up in the field behind the store. We set up the table first. It was round and had strange writings in it. So did the chairs. It was really creepy. We used a security light on the back of the store so we could see. My grandmother then put a load of homemade bread in the center of the table. I'm not sure why. She then surrounded the bread with 3 white candles, forming a perfect triangle, and lit them. She said the spirit world is cold. The heat from the candles will help draw the spirits closer, as the spirits will seek out warmth from the flames. She also instructed us to turn off our cell phones to avoid distractions. Then, she explained our duties for the seance. She said that she will act as a medium, meaning she will invite the spirits to join us, and allow them to communicate through her, if they choose to. She will also be the one to close the session when it's completed. My brother, as I said earlier, will translate the answers, if there are any. Also read a list of questions in Cherokee that we wrote down earlier, in English. Candy, Pat, and I are there as witnesses. We all joined hands around the table and began the seance. My grandmother began by saying, "O great spirits that inhabit this land, we invite you to join us tonight. We offer you the gift of heat from these candles that sit before us. We offer you this bread to nourish your hunger for this world. Please come and speak to us." As she finished her invite, the wind suddenly stopped blowing, the crickets stopped cricketing, and the air became cold and heavy. After a few moments, she repeated her invite once again. This time, the flames from all the candles burst up about an inch, like a flamethrower when you squeeze and release a trigger. Then, they went back to normal. Candy screamed and began to shake. "They're here. Be quiet," my grandmother said. "Ask the first question." For the sake of this story, I will tell you the questions that were asked in English, but when this has all happened, it was spoken in Cherokee. My brother asked, "How long have you been here?" Suddenly, we heard rustling in trees. We all turned our heads to look. The wind started blowing again, hard. So hard that it thrust our heads all around. We were all fighting to stay upright. Somehow the candles stayed lit. But the list of questions blew away. Through the whistling of the wind, we heard a disembodied voice saying, "Many Munis." "Many moons," my brother said. "That means many moons." Candy began to cry at this point. "I can't do this, I'm scared," she whined. "Calm down," my grandmother said. "We're safe as long as we hold the circle." She was wrong. Suddenly, an enormous gust of wind came through, blowing Pat's toupee completely off his head, blowing the candles out, then picking the table up and slamming it directly into Pat's and my brother's faces, knocking them backwards and out of their chairs, and pulling Candy, my grandmother and myself out of our chairs and directly on top of them. Blood was gushing out of Pat's nose like a water faucet, as he laid there unconscious. My brother's head was bleeding as well. He was awake and moaning. "Do not break the circle," my grandmother yelled. The tables and chairs that were lying on the ground began to levitate in the air and took flight, and slammed hard into the back of the store and the security light, causing it to explode. Sparks went everywhere. We were now in total darkness. Candy was screaming at the top of her lungs. "Shut up," I yelled at her. She finally stopped and began whimpering like a wounded animal. Just then, a dim yellow light began to rise from the ground, through the grass, covering the entire field, and the 5 of us as well. The sound of tom-tom drums began echoing through the night, getting louder as each second passed. The ground started to shake, and transparent images of Native Americans began to rise from the ground. There were men, women, and children slowly rising from the dirt and grass. I got the feeling like I just walked through a spiderweb, as I actually watched a spirit rise directly through my body. I watched as they rose through all of us. I will never forget that moment for as long as I live. My grandmother then screamed louder than I ever heard her scream. "What do you want?" My brother mumbled the translation. Just as he finished his sentence, everything stopped. No more wind, no more drums, no more spirits rising on the ground. They were all standing around us now. I tried to scream, but nothing came out. Suddenly, we heard another several disembodied voices saying, "We're spaghetti," over and over again at the same time. My brother began mumbling something that sounded like a word, but I couldn't understand what he was saying. "What, Summers? I can't understand you." He took a deep breath and said it once again. "Respect. They want respect," he said in a groggy voice. My grandmother then said, "I close this circle of communication and thank you all for joining us tonight. You may now break the circle." I immediately grabbed my phone out of my pocket, turned on the flashlight, and went to go check on Pat. I shook him a couple of times and he woke up, completely unaware of the events that happened. Dazed and confused, he sat up slowly, the blood caked to his face. My grandmother and my brother sat up, and they said they were okay. Candy, however, was lying in the fetal position, crying and shaking uncontrollably. I called 911 and said that there had been an incident and to send an ambulance. The ambulance arrived and attended to Pat. They called a second ambulance for Candy. They gave Candy a mild sedative, loaded her in the back of the ambulance, and took her to the hospital for an overnight stay. She was released the following morning. Pat, however, was treated for severe head trauma, taken to hospital and stayed there for over a week and a half. He said he got a couple of the nurses' phone numbers, the dirty old man that he is. My brother had to drive my grandmother and I back home. Candy picked up her van a few days later. Anyway, once Pat got out of the hospital, I called him and told him exactly what happened that night. I also asked if it would be possible to use that room off the back of the store as a memorial or tribute to the Native American community, for which I would have full control over. He graciously agreed. I contacted several people from my old reservation about donating items to the memorial, books, old Indian arrowheads, clothing, that sort of thing. The response was overwhelming. I got a ton of stuff. They finally finished the store, as well as my memorial room, and the store opened back up soon after. The activity has died down a lot, so I've heard. You still see an occasional sighting or two around the store, but nothing too serious. I got my room organized. My mum helped me decorate, and I opened up soon after that. I hired one of the waitresses from the bar I used to work at to cover the night shifts. She's a friend of mine, so that worked out well. My father, my brother, and several other people from the reservation often make random trips here to donate their time, taking pictures or answering questions to anyone that might have. So, if you want to know more about the Native American culture, please stop by any time, or call Barnaby's. Select option 3 for Memorial. We're open 7 AM till 9 PM, Monday through Saturday. There's no charge to enter, but donations are accepted. Oh, and yeah, we never did find Pat's toupee.